The single fastest way to sound smarter whenever you talk is to actually stop trying to sound smarter. I learned this the hard way. I started a business when I was just some kid in his bedroom. What ended up happening was I would go on these calls, I would feel crazy imposter syndrome, and I'd try and use big words, jargon to make it seem like I knew what I was doing. I ended up getting yelled at, shouted at, ignored, and ghosted. So what ended up actually working was when I understood what I'm about to show you in this video, and it changed everything. The normal advice that you'll hear of sounding smarter is use big words, expand your vocabulary, and here's why that doesn't work. Using big words like, say, perspicacious doesn't actually mean being smart. In reality, it morally means being cute. Here's what I mean by that. There was a time a few years ago when I was in college and Alex Hormozy came to my school, well, virtually. He showed up for this event. There was a bunch of students there, all in this classroom in front of the screen, and he was giving advice. People were asking questions. Let me get his beard in there. He was doing his usual spiel of, oh yeah, only one or two of you in this room are actually gonna start a business, all that stuff, right? And I remember being nervous, but I was like, screw it, let me ask a question. And I went like, okay, you've given us a lot of advice on what we should be doing. What should we not do? And he thinks for a couple of seconds, and he says, don't be cute. It was a piece of advice that an old mentor he had given him. And it was basically, don't focus so much on making your logo pretty or your landing page beautiful. Focus on making sure that you're doing the actions that actually get you results. But one place that the advice, don't be cute, works really well in is communication. Because what ends up happening with a lot of people when they're trying to sound smart is they'll be talking to somebody else. Say, this is you, this is them. And you're speaking at a level that's up here, but the other person is speaking at a level that's over here. So what that ends up doing is that there's a mismatch and the other person can't understand you. They'll walk away from that conversation thinking this person was pretentious, this person was explaining it in a complicated way, and I didn't really get anything from that conversation. So it doesn't really do anything for either of you. So instead, what you should be focusing on is not trying to sound the smartest, but focusing on meeting the other person where they're at. Because the only thing that matters in communication at all is this. Does the other person understand me, and vice versa? And this sounds really simple, but a lot of people don't actually take this advice when they talk, because they're so focused on themselves. How do I look? Do I look smart? Am I going to close this sale? Am I going to get a new follower or a new subscriber by talking smart? And what this ends up doing is that the other person can sense that you're not really focusing on them. You're not really listening to them. You're just focused on trying to sound smart, and you end up breaking rapport with the other person. When you meet the other person where you're at, or where they're at, you can build rapport with them and get to a point where they understand you so well that everything you say is going to sound smart because they understand it. So I'm not saying to never use big words. If you're talking to a group of philosophy professors, go and use the word perspicacious, I don't care. But if you're talking to a client that you're trying to coach to get results, instead of using big jargon, you should try and meet the other person where they're at. Say that you're on a call, you're talking to somebody and they talk in a specific way. Instead of talking like this, you talk in the way that they talk, and you build rapport so much faster. So say, for example, you're talking to somebody, they like to speak slower, they like to use specific words. What you can do is you can mirror that. You can see the words that they're using, you can see the rate of speech that they're talking at, and slow down and use some of the words that they like to use. And what that ends up doing is that the other person understands you more. So the more that you mirror the other person so that they understand you better, and the more that you use functional body language and direct words when you talk, the more that you can get your message across. And ironically, the smarter you'll sound. Tailor it to your audience and it'll be a lot better. Now, the second thing that you need to fix in order to sound smarter whenever you talk is actually a little bit deeper than that. Because I remember for myself in my old business, I would hop on these calls with executives that I had no business speaking to, and I felt like I needed to make it seem like I was a smart guy. I would literally put on a pair of glasses that I would rarely wear just so that I would appear smarter. But this didn't work. And the reason why is because you can't communicate at a level that you don't see yourself at already. If you see yourself as, say, an imposter, but you're trying to speak at the level of an expert, there's a mismatch. So your thoughts are going to be betraying you as you talk. So if it's not in your words that uncertainty shows, it's going to be in your body language and the way that you carry yourself. And ultimately, people are going to be able to sense that mismatch, and it's going to sound awkward and it's going to sound forced, and they're not going to trust you. You have two options. You either raise the way that you see yourself to be an expert, or you just accept that you're an imposter. And more likely than not, you're probably not an imposter. You're just not giving yourself the credit that you actually have. Instead of focusing so much on, oh man, I really need this other person to like me, I really need this other person to think that I'm an expert, have that certainty that no, I actually am the expert here. And then you can shift your focus away from yourself and towards them. At the end of the day, whenever you feel some kind of nerves or whenever you feel any kind of pressure on a call, the best thing that you can do is to shift your focus away from yourself into the other person. And then you'll have a lot more certainty in the way that you communicate, and they'll feel a lot more certainty in you. Now, if you're somebody who feels like they can't communicate their expertise as well as they wanted to when they're under pressure, whether they're on a coaching call or a sales call, whatever, then check out the link in the description. I have a live workshop coming up very soon where you'll be able to learn how to overcome that on your next call. I hope this was helpful. My name is Cole Lutalo, and remember, don't overthink it. You're a lot better at speaking than you think that you are. Have a good one.